What ancient traditions from Atlantis to Egypt to the Temple of Solomon have consistently revealed about the fundamental structure underlying all manifestation is something so essential that removing even one element causes entire systems to collapse? Research into mystery schools across cultures shows a recurring pattern that goes far beyond architectural necessity. The Egyptians built their temples with papyrus columns reaching toward heaven. Solomon's temple featured the bronze pillars Jachin and Boaz. Greek architecture developed 5 distinct orders of columns, each representing different stages of human development. What these traditions understood is that columns represent something far more profound than structural support. They discovered a principle that governs not just buildings, but consciousness itself. Subscribe to One Paradox Collective as we investigate why every sacred space throughout history has been built on this foundation of duality. Studies of ancient Egyptian mystery schools reveal that columns were never merely architectural elements. Research into the Great Hypostyle Hall at Karnak shows 134 columns arranged in precise patterns, each papyrus-shaped column representing the primordial marshes from which creation emerged. The lotus and papyrus capitals weren't decorative choices but symbolic representations of the unfolding cosmos. What archaeological evidence consistently demonstrates is that these column arrangements followed mathematical principles. The 5 classical orders Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Tuscan, and Composite each corresponded to specific stages of spiritual development. The Doric order, with its simple strength, represented foundational consciousness. The ornate Corinthian, with its acanthus leaves, symbolized the flowering of human potential. Modern analysis of temple construction reveals that ancient builders weren't simply creating shelter. They were constructing physical representations of cosmic law. Each column served as a pillar connecting earth to heaven, matter to spirit. What research into Solomon's temple reveals is perhaps the most direct expression of this principle. The biblical accounts describe 2 bronze pillars, Jachin and Boaz, standing free at the temple entrance. Modern archaeological studies of similar structures throughout the ancient Near East confirm this wasn't unique to Hebrew architecture. Jachin, meaning he will establish, was positioned on the right. Boaz, meaning in him is strength, stood on the left. Together, they declared that divine establishment comes through the balance of complementary forces. These weren't structural supports, they were symbolic gateways marking the transition from profanity to sacred space. Cross-cultural investigations house this dual-pillar motif appearing across civilizations. Egyptian pylons featured twin towers flanking temple entrances. Greek architecture employed paired columns. The Pillars of Hercules at Gibraltar represented this same principle on a geographical scale. What these traditions recognized is that manifestation itself requires polarization. Creation emerges from the interaction between opposing yet complementary forces. Without duality, there can be no movement, no growth, no consciousness. Research into mystical traditions reveals how this principle extends beyond physical architecture into the structure of consciousness itself. Ancient wisdom diagrams depict 3 pillars: the pillar of severity on the left, the pillar of mercy on the right, and the pillar of balance in the center. What scholars of esoteric traditions have documented is that these represent the fundamental organization of reality. Studies of ancient initiation practices show that candidates would literally pass between columns as part of their spiritual development. This wasn't symbolic theater, but practical training in balancing opposing forces within themselves. The column on the right represented expansion, creativity, the masculine principle. The left column embodied contraction, receptivity, the feminine principle. What modern consciousness research confirms is that human awareness operates through similar polarities. The brain's hemispheres process information differently, yet optimal functioning requires their integration. Ancient builders understood this millennia before neuroscience validated their insights. Investigation into mystery school practices reveals that students learned to embody these principles. They discovered that true strength comes not from choosing one side over another, but from maintaining dynamic balance between complementary forces. What research into ancient transmission methods reveals is how this columnar principle governed spiritual hierarchies. Studies of initiation lineages show that knowledge flowed through structured relationships that mirrored architectural principles. A master would work with 2 primary students who would each develop their own 2 disciples, creating a tree-like structure of transmission. Archaeological evidence from various mystery schools confirms this wasn't accidental. The same mathematical ratios found in column proportions appear in the organization of spiritual communities. Investigation into these patterns reveals a sophisticated understanding of how consciousness develops and transmits wisdom. Modern analysis of ancient texts show when one column in this hierarchy would complete their earthly work, the structure would adapt. The remaining column might become central, developing new supporting pillars, or the two supporting columns might each become primary pillars themselves. This ensured continuity while allowing for natural evolution. What these traditions discovered is that consciousness itself operates hierarchically. Higher levels of awareness require increasingly sophisticated frameworks to maintain stability. The column principle provides that framework, ensuring that expanded states can be sustained and transmitted. What ancient wisdom consistently reveals is that columns represent more than architectural innovation. They embody a fundamental law of manifestation. From the papyrus columns of Egyptian temples to the bronze pillars of Solomon's temple to the 3 pillars of the Kabbalistic tree of life, we see the same principle expressed across cultures and millennia. Research into consciousness development confirms what these traditions taught. Growth requires the dynamic balance of opposing forces. Without duality, there can be no movement. Without structure, expansion leads to chaos. The column principle provides both the framework for development and the pathway for transcendence. Modern applications of these principles can be observed in successful organizations, healthy relationships, and individual psychological development. Understanding how to work with polarities, rather than against them, transforms conflict into creative tension. Here's our investigation question. Where in your own life do you notice the interplay between opposing forces that, when balanced, create something greater than either could achieve alone? Share your observations in the comments below. Subscribe to One Paradox Collective for more investigations into consciousness, ancient wisdom, and the hidden structures that govern human potential. We do not promise easy answers about reality's mysteries. We promise better questions about the extraordinary architecture underlying existence.